And we're live. It is Friday, the 13th of June, the year of our Lord 2025. I am not on a train today, which means that Holly is not going to be
Circulation is
surprised
good.
by suddenly finding herself on camera by herself and you know it's, I'm in a hotel room. I'm going to take the train after the show. Maybe we should give up on this whole trains doing shows from moving trains thing.
What is
Um,
this? By the way, you have this like 19th century like decor behind you. What is this? Have you gone back in time? You have this
I
like
have.
silhouette,
The only item from the 21st century is my
the internet.
mic and my internet, but the hotel is otherwise solidly fixed in the 19th century. And the delightful French bakery in the um, in the lobby of the hotel is staffed entirely by young French people
Oh,
who and seems to be patronized mostly by French people,
I thought you were
suggesting
going to say Victorians.
no, French people,
Port.
which suggests to me that the pastries must be very good. And the only problem with them is that I can't eat any of them for blood sugar and nut reasons.
Oh,
So I'm pro this hotel. I like the being flanked by two silhouettes, male and female, like Noah's Ark. And I will I will just say the Israelis once again did not consult my schedule or convenience
or
before.
Donald Trump, I don't think.
No, and did not consult Donald Trump's schedule or convenience before launching the latest attack on Iran. Um, So we're going to talk about it. I haven't had that much time to figure out exactly what we know, although I have had some and I've done some work on it. We also don't know very much yet. And in addition, I think we should assume that the Israeli attacks are not yet finished, that there will be more this evening. And so we should assume this is still a work in progress. That said, I know what you're asking. I know your first question was this a cactus operation or was it a snowman operation? And
Or
I,
both. Oh,
I think the answer was this was an all hands situation. Both the cactus and the snowman were involved, and we're gonna find out in a moment. Let's see. Snowman, were you involved? He's glomaring us. Cactus, were you involved? Right. But you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a freaking revolution in morning television because where else do we respond to a major Israeli attack on Iran by asking inanimate objects about their involvement on it? And one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many, is that like every other show, we're going to speculate wildly about this. But unlike, um, other morning television shows, we are not going to have somebody who used to be um, an official for an hour and a half in the department of, whatever logistics for that who knows nothing about aerial attacks on nuclear officials and nuclear sites talking very authoritatively with no information. We're going to announce kind of in advance that we have limited information and that neither of us is an expert on air war or on the Iranian nuclear program. And we're going to kind of do it from there. So radical transparency. We're going to talk about it. We don't know very much, both because we're both
That's never
ignorant.
stopped us before.
Yeah, exactly. And because we are, don't, there's not a whole lot of information yet. All right. All of which is a long-winded way of saying that, you know, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, it's going to be a great frickin' day. We're not allowed to have fun anymore, but apparently the Israeli Air Force is. Um, Holly, where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, I was just going to update people on my art operation yesterday, but if nobody's interested in that, we can just go straight to Iran.
Oh no, let's start with art projects.
So I went up to Capitol Hill yesterday and it was very hot, by the way. I wasn't prepared for how hot it was. And the best part was that I unknowingly participated in Seersucker Day. It was it was Seersucker Day on at least in the Senate side, and I was wearing it wasn't like official seersucker that has that little pucker, but it was like the blue and white fine stripes. I was wearing like a sundress for the heat, and everybody thought I was a staffer because I was in what appeared to be seersucker. So that made
So
me
you
happy.
accidentally played into Seersucker Day?
I did. I played into Seersucker Day. Um, And it was confirmed by a woman on the elevator remark. I overheard conversation of like, "Oh, good, you're wearing your seersucker," and I was like, and then I was actually ushered into an area for staff only, given directions like, and it was like, and then there was a guard there, and I was like, "Huh, what? This woman just told me to go there, so I'll try." So I try to go there.
And because you were wearing a
Yeah,
seersucker,
because I had no badge, but I had on seersucker. And so that was amusing. And then he actually stopped me and was like, "Where's your badge?" And I was like, "I'm a seersucker." And that did not work.
all
So,
right, so I have a question for you.
yeah.
Important seersucker question raised by Linda in the chat. A lot of people, and I'm really not sure why, on the internet have decided that the word moist is very uncomfortable and they find
Yeah,
it very
I don't
upsetting.
like that either.
Um, what do we think of the word seersucker?
I think it's cheery. I do find okay, so like a seer I do find seersucker on men to be unsettling. I don't want to say it's bad, and I don't want to like because I know some one lovely man in particular I know who wears seersucker, has a seersucker suit, and so I would never want it. But I do find it a little unsettling. It
No, no,
goes
but I'm talking about the word.
yeah, the word's fine. It's just the what it is.
Hmm,
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, but I like
I
Sears.
find the word mildly uncomfortable.
Okay, that's fine.
I was
I
talking,
haven't
I was
thought of-
talking to Anna Bauer last night about why people hate the word moist. And I have to say, there are words that bother me much more than the word moist.
What
One of
words
them is
bother you? Seersucker?
yam.
Yam.
I do not like the word yam.
Hmm. Okay. I'd have to think about this. I definitely don't like the word moist. I don't know why. I, I don't know. It
All
just
right.
does. Yeah, it's fine. But seersucker, it's
Seersucker doesn't bother you?
not the word. The fabric bothers me slightly.
Okay.
So on men in particular. Women, I have had seersucker. It's just, it goes to the whole like white southern thing, you
Yeah,
know?
which, is its own thing.
Yeah. So anyway, it was seersucker day on the Senate. So I went and delivered my six pieces of art to six senators who I did research and I identified six senators who had specifically spoken out about the Medicaid cuts, and like they didn't like that. And so, not surprisingly, both the senators from West Virginia, large portions of whose constituents are on Medicaid, I think, um, and to Bill Cassidy and Roger Marshall of Kansas, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. They're both physicians. They've spoken out against it. Susan Collins, because whatever, Susan Collins,
She has to
and
express
then
concern.
Tom Tillis, who is, what passes for kind of a moderate senator, who is up for reelection this year. I mean, next year, crucially, up for reelection next year. And in a state that has been a swing state on occasion. So those are who I went. Now so I went, and the flags, which I think I showed you, they're not, I wouldn't say that they weren't rude or disrespectful at all, but they were pointed. They weren't just like rah rah, thank you for everything. It was like basically challenging the people to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I walked in and gave each of the staff, and they were thrilled. They didn't before they could, and then I left before they could actually read the words, but they liked the art. They were like, "Oh,
Well,
thank
it's
you."
good stuff.
Yeah, it's very flashy, and I don't know what they're going to do with it. But and then I left, and it was all very fine. The only I always have one staffer who you can tell is like a by the rules kind of person. It was actually Tom Tillis's staffer, who was like, we can't accept gifts, and of course I've written on the back. It's important, by the way, that this is a handmade item of negligible real value. You know,
That
and
sells on Etsy for.
but that's art has no real value if you make it.
No, no,
Like
I agree.
it's
I
not like
agree. That's why if you tape a banana to the wall and somebody gives you $1 million for it, they can just turn around and eat the banana, and they've just overpaid for a banana.
exactly. So art is like that's the beauty of art, right? It's in the values in the eye of the beholder, but there's no real value, especially to my art. It's scraps of fabric that most people would throw away. It's a board, which again is probably like, I mean, I have to pay more than what they're worth to get them, and it's some glue, and a little paint. It's a very negligible real value. So anyway, I think it's fine. So I induced him to take it. But he was reluctant. The others did not seem to be. But I'm having sort of second thoughts about. I'm thinking now that what I should have done was just the preamble on the front and then written on the back, like please, support Medicaid, and remember your blah 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 blah, your oath, and written a message on the back, so that, because the way it is now, like I think they'll probably trash it, versus if it's the preamble, they might not. So I'm kind of rethinking my strategy. I have an art party tonight. We're going to make a whole bunch of more Ukraine flags, and I'm going to do a Ukraine delivery. Welcome thoughts on. Okay, here's a question. Again, I know we'll get to Iran. I know, and we will, because I know nothing about that, but we will get to it. But what are your thoughts on Lindsey Graham? Because he is really vexing me. Jeff, it's going out in the mail today, by the way, your flag. Um, because if you will recall, and I found the video for this, the parody I made, after the Zelensky Oval meeting, like he came out like and was like trashing Zelensky. He wondered if we could ever work with him again, and he was very dramatic and hostile.
Right.
And then, of course, he's been disappointing on many fronts, off and on. But then now he's leading the charge on this sanctions bill that is before the Senate, and has, by the way, it's like 84 senators
Right.
supporting it. Like it's going to pass. And he recently visited Ukraine. So I don't know what to do with Lindsey.
The answer is ignore him, um, because he is, I think, the least principled person in the Senate.
I think so.
He stands for nothing whatsoever.
Hmm.
He's pious at all points and indignant at all points in support of his a position that may change an hour from now and will be just as pious on the other side. And one thing he doesn't give a shit about is what you or I or anyone else who's not part of the immediate power vertical to which he uh, reports cares about and thinks. So he has some instincts that are good, but he's not committed to them at all. I mean, if tomorrow the political advantage were to be on the other side of that Russia sanctions bill, he would switch sides and be just as strong against it as he has been for it. Um, I think he is. Um, I don't know. I read um, the excellent little mini book about him by Will
Yes,
Salatin.
I did too. Very
There was
good.
just nothing left of Lindsey Graham at the
Yeah.
end of it. And I've actually worked with him on a couple matters over the years. And um, I just think there's not enough person there left to engage with.
Okay. We'll
He's,
keep Lindsay.
you know, he's mostly he's a shell of a person, and you can't um, you can't even identify what the things are that he really cares about are. He's just you know when the dog is just panting for approval for you and will just kind of run in circles and that's Lindsey Graham. And so
Yeah.
I just, I actually have a lot more respect for the Mitch McConnells who have been on this, that they do a lot that I disagree with and have contempt for and hate. But there are a core of things to which they are committed, some of which, like Ukraine, I share the commitment, some of which, like, you know, packing the courts with right wingers does not move me particularly. But you can identify a set of things to which Mitch McConnell has actually devoted time and energy and commitment, and I can't really do that at this point with Lindsey Graham. So
Yeah.
I um,
So we skip. Although, so my daughter's thought on this was that everybody should get a Ukraine flag, whether they're pro-Ukraine or anti-Ukraine, just to make, just to keep it in their minds. And it's a nice piece of art, and like it'll just, just to keep it in people's minds, which I thought was actually a good idea. That would be a lot of flags. I could make smaller ones, and that would go quicker. The bigger ones take longer. Um,
You know, I have a point to make about the Ukrainian flag, which is lots of Americans bring Ukrainian flags to protests and nobody minds. But if you bring a Mexican flag to a protest, it shows up on Fox News. Go
yes.
figure. I
Yeah.
have literally wrapped myself in a Ukrainian flag and walked around and
I
given a
have a
speech
hat.
speaking as an American. And, nobody seems to mind that. Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Irish flags, too.
Yeah, I'm probably going to wear my Ukraine flag hat to the protest on Saturday, but I'm going to be carrying American flags. So, um,
Mm, don't do that.
oh, really? No,
No,
no Ukraine?
no. Uh, don't rip American flags. Um, and um,
No, no, I'm
and
not
don't.
going to rip them. I'm going to fly them. The organizers are asking us to fly them.
Oh, I thought you said tear.
No, 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 no. I would never
I'm
do
sorry.
that.
Okay,
No,
misheard.
no. I'm
All
going
right.
to wear my Ukraine. I have a
Oh,
hat.
where? I see. Okay,
And then I'm going to wave. I would
gotcha.
never tear any flag unless, I don't know. I probably never tear any flag because that actually, in Sound of Music, when he tears the Nazi flag, They
Yeah,
had to
I carry a Nazi flag.
that. Yeah, I'd do that. Okay, there's flags I would tear, but it's actually hard work. They had to like pre-cut it and like they'll kind of
Velcro it.
impact it because he couldn't get it. Any fun fact. Yeah.
Fun fact. All right. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, um, all right, y'all cut me off anytime. Um, Questions, comments, corrections, whatever, information.
I will
Um,
monitor the chat for good questions
okay,
because I probably don't even know enough to have good questions.
so let's start with the rampant rumors that this is Netanyahu being a stalking horse for Trump. This is clearly wrong. Um, it is very clear that this is an Israeli, not a U.S. operation, and it is not a joint operation. And it is almost as clear that Trump didn't want it to happen. So let's give the evidence of that. First of all, there's an ongoing U.S. Iranian negotiation that Trump is pretty committed to. And he was
Which is
committed to.
basically to reconfigure the JCPOA that Trump
Exactly.
destroyed.
Trump wants the
Same.
JCPOA back or something like it, which, by the way, the Israelis hated then and don't want now.
Right.
And so Trump is negotiating on the basis of something very similar to the JCPOA, um, maybe with some additional stuff, but maybe not. Uh, and as late as last night, Trump was insisting that negotiations were continuing. So the evidence that the that this is not an American operation and not something that Trump was ready to do is pretty compelling. So why do the Israelis go ahead with this um, without tight coordination with the Americans? The answer, I think, is threefold. The first is that the Iranians is to head off the possibility of a U.S.-Iran deal. That the Iranians are, whether they're at nuclear breakthrough moment or breakout or whether they're close, they're certainly very close. This is a much bigger problem for Israel than it is for the United States. And Trump doesn't assess U.S. interests especially accurately anyway. But Netanyahu is whatever else one may say about him. He's a pretty cold tactician. And by the way, he's been obsessed with this issue for 30 years. And he's been waiting for an opportunity. Uh, so why now? Number one, because if you don't do now, you may have a US-Iran deal. Number two, because Iran has no air defenses anymore because of the last Israeli strike, which was done with US participation. Number three, and let's be frank about this, Netanyahu's government is very fragile. There's you know, continuing the war in Gaza is deeply unpopular in Israel. And as once the war winds down, the likelihood that the government will fall is non-trivial. There was a no confidence vote or vote to dissolve the Knesset this week that failed, but not by much. And there's a huge amount of tension within Israel over the drafting of ultra-Orthodox men. So, it's pretty hard to break up a government in the middle of Shagala Bagala. And see, did I do it right? Did I use it correctly? All
You
right.
did.
Um, and the fourth reason may be opportunistic, that, these operations are quite exquisite, and the Israelis are, you know, there are things that they are unprepared for, like October 7th, where, you can see all kinds of flaws in their planning, all kinds of flaws in their operational assumptions, and, the distortions that their politics cause. For example, having a lot of people in the West Bank when you should have them on the Gaza border, etc. But one thing they are extremely good at, and we saw it with Hezbollah and we saw it last night, is long-term planning against very specific targets. And they have been wargaming this to for 20 years. Um, and sometimes you get a situation where something is perishable in that plan. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but they knew what room of a housing building a given guy was going to be in. So I don't think that played a major role in it because they did give a few days warning to the United States, which caused this evacuation of certain U.S. personnel from Iraq. And so they were willing to give up some aspect of the element of surprise. Like we all kind of knew this was coming. That said, one possibility is that that operational factors played a role in it. So, all right. By the way, that's the other evidence that the U.S. was not behind this is, sorry, go ahead, Holly.
Oh, I was just going to say, so you're saying this is was not a birthday gift for Trump,
No, 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 no. In fact, I really think
kind of a
that
birthday slam.
Trump Trump probably was annoyed by this,
Oh yeah,
and
he seemed I feel like his tweets or whatever, his truth socials, whatever. He sounds like he's scrambling to make it seem like he knew what was going on or like he was somehow in on it, but it's like kind of obvious. Like
well,
he's
yeah, I think as soon as it looked like the initial component of it was successful, he started making it seem like it was part of his plan.
right.
But it's clearly not.
Yeah, it's so
Um, this is
not.
this is clearly a situation in which Netanyahu, as he does, bullheadedly goes off on his own and does his own thing. And remember, this is an important thing for people who think of Netanyahu as an Israeli Trump. Netanyahu is smart.
Oh, wait.
Trump is dumb.
Trump is so
And so they're characterologically similar in a lot of ways, but they're neither temperamentally very similar nor are they intellectually similar. So what happens here is that for whatever combination of reasons, Netanyahu decides this is go time for Israel. He comes to Trump sometime last week or this past week and says, we're going, let's do this joint. Trump says no, and pulling U.S. people out of Iraq, out of target zones in Iraq. His initial response when Israeli air jets are in the air is this is not a U.S. operation. Do not retaliate against U.S. forces. Then the operation starts to look very impressive. He turns on a dime and tries to use it as though. So, like, I think credit or blame here goes exclusively to Netanyahu. So that brings us to the credit or blame question. This is too early to figure out. Here is what, as of 35 minutes ago, when I stopped looking at what was happening, here is what I think we can say. So the initial strikes and the ones that are most most important, like most high profile are the ones that are targeted at individuals. So understand this as like the decapitation strikes on Hezbollah that started the campaign to wipe out Hezbollah. Um, uh, these would have been extremely carefully planned. They appear to have been successful. They took out, the top military commander, a bunch of scientists. So these are, think of these as like, and again, I'm saying a little bit beyond what we know for sure here, but these would have been like identify the key people like down to the like Holly Berkeley Fletcher is important in Africa analysis at CIA. Let's get her, right? Identifying key people in the program and trying to kill them all. Or now, did they kill them all? We don't know. They certainly got some of them. Did they kill enough of them to make a difference in the Iranian nuclear program? We don't know. Did they get some of them? Yes. So the second bunch of attacks, or concurrent, the second group that we know about is directed at one of the three major nuclear facilities. As of when I last looked, the other two had not been hit yet. I expect that to change over the course of the day today or tomorrow, right? Before this operation is over, I think they will try to hit uh, every major site they know about. And that includes some sites that are really, really hardened, like deep underground, and they have spent, you know, 15, 20 years thinking about how to get to those sites. Expect something pretty dramatic as they uh, did. They do appear to have already hit the sort of nerve center of the program, which is the Natanz facility. Um, they say there has been substantial damage to that. Let's let's stop with they seem to have hit it, and there's smoke billowing out of it. How much how much damage there is, and more to the point, is there enough damage to forestall Iranian nuclear development? Let's wait a couple weeks to know the answer to that question. Um, so that brings me to the last component, which is the Iranian response. The Iranians threatened a uh, devastating punishment. Their capacity to punish Israel right now is relatively limited, but it does involve. So the one of the reasons that Netanyahu is free to do this is that the major Iranian proxy groups that are pressed up against Israeli borders have all been, to one degree or another, neutralized. Hezbollah is a shell of its former self. Um, the Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which are only kind of Iranian proxies in the sense that they're not Shia, but they are funded and aided by Iran in attacking Israel. They're under severe pressure from the Gaza operation and mostly incapacitated as a fighting force capable of actually projecting into Israel. And of course, the Houthis, who are Iranian backed and inspired, are far away and firing missiles anyway. So, it's not like this is going to activate them. So Iran's major strategic idea of how to confront Israel, which is to surround it with Shia proxy groups, is kind of been mooted by the post October 7th. And this is why Israel is sort of free to do this now rather than 2 years ago when you would have had 10,000 Hezbollah missiles an hour coming over the border if something like this had happened. So, what are Iran's
Everybody
options?
already hates Netanyahu. He's kind of been thumbing his nose at the international community for a while, since October 7th anyway. So
Right. Well, yeah, and this one, I mean, to be fair to Netanyahu, this one does not implicate civilian life to the extent, this is not like Gaza, where, Hezbollah is, uh, Hamas is deeply embedded with civilians, and you can't take out Hamas without taking out a lot of innocent civilians. This is a a set of military operations against military um, uh, and nuclear targets. And it will not be antiseptic from civilian life by any means, but you can do it in a fashion that's much more like a military to military um, conflict. Um, Okay, so what are Iran's options by way of response? One, which you saw a little bit of last night, is you can launch drones and missiles. This turns out not to work very well because the Israelis have really, really good theater missile defense, theater air defenses, and when they need it, the Americans will help them. Now, this is how this will not work, but it may drag the Americans into the war. And this is why it is a significant um, thing that we have to think about. You can send enough missiles over that the Israelis can't deal with them alone, and will the U.S. will activate forces, at least under the last administration, would activate forces to prevent them from landing. And if that were to happen, then U.S. forces are involved. Keep an eye on that because that's the mechanism by which, or one of the two mechanisms by which the U.S. gets dragged into this. The second thing the Iranians can do is um, attack U.S. forces in Iraq. And you'll notice Trump um, uh, um, tweeted about this, warning about this. The Iranians really don't distinguish much between the Israelis and the Americans. Big Satan, little Satan. They consider the Israelis a branch office of the United States, which has roots in a lot of things. One of which is that they are, uh, that they really are classic anti-Semites who see Jews running the United States, Jews running the United this little outpost of the West run by Jews. Um, uh, that is the other way the U.S. gets dragged into this is, missiles into uh, Iraq. U.S. still has some forces and, it has a whole lot of diplomatic forces, military people protecting them. And of course, we have a few people in Syria as well. So, and then there's a third option, which everybody forgets about, but is in fact a big part of the Iranian playbook, which is terrorism. The Iranians, they haven't done this much recently, um, but when they really feel boxed in, they do things like sometimes they do it themselves, sometimes they do it through Hezbollah. But they do stuff like, blowing up the Jewish community center in Argentina, which, killed an astonishing number of people back in the day. And sometimes they try to assassinate former U.S. presidents, attacks on uh, um, which they've, thought about before. They had an assassination plot against John Bolton not too long ago. So there's a component that is um, they may decide they have no good military options, but they can assassinate people. They can blow up a major Jewish target somewhere. And again, Argentinian Jews, not dissimilar in their view from the United States or Israel, right? One big package. Um, uh, so that is my thought this morning. That is where I can um, uh, draw some lines. And as you see, it's not much. Like we really,
No, you wrote like a whole article just orally right here. You
I don't
wrote like
know.
a whole op-ed.
Let's see, Lior, what did I get wrong? Um,
Leor hasn't chimed in too much, but so what I'm gathering is that I'm really shocked. Trump is not much of a peacemaker. Like things, I thought he was going to solve all of these things, and he's somehow not a peacemaker. And in fact, he's on like all fronts. Like people would just be playing him like severely. Israel, Russia's playing him. China's like calling his bluff on the trade stuff. Like he's looking very, very weak internationally. And someone in the chat had the question of would Netanyahu have done this with a different president, or is Trump's weakness part of the internationally, in particular, part of the equation?
so I want to defend Trump on this very specific question, which is um, it, it, Trump's weakness may have played into it in small ways, but Bibi Netanyahu has been waiting for this day for 30 years. Um, and when when the constellation of forces arrived, which involved the proxy forces not being available to him, Iran being close to breakout, um, and and some element of time being perishable between the breakout and his government collapsing or wanting to, keep the kinetic movement going. He was gonna do this. And would Biden have handled it more elegantly so that I couldn't sit here the morning after and say, we know what the administration's botched? Well, yeah, he would have handled it better. Um, would But there is no way Netanyahu was not going to move forward with this when he had the chance. He's been talking about this like almost my entire adult life. Um, and this is when he goes to sleep at night dreaming of how he can change the Middle East, he's thinking about this.
Hmm.
And so I don't think it is a function of Trump's weakness. Now, what may be a function of Trump's weakness is the inability to stay out of it. And by the way, I'm not certain we should stay out of it, but we should have a deliberate policy where we know what we're trying to accomplish. We know what would bring us in, what wouldn't bring us in. Trump is so emotionally volatile that I don't believe for a second he's capable of doing that. Whereas I do have a lot of confidence in last, the last team, at least having a certain policy planning capacity, right? But I don't think you can blame Trump for, you know, uh, we've known this was coming ever since Hezbollah was destroyed and sends a bunch of missiles over and we and the Israelis shoot down all of them. And the Israelis respond by taking out all of Iran's strategic air defenses. Once that happened, it was like only a matter of time before the Israelis went after the nuclear program because they can, right?
Hmm.
And the only reason they didn't do this 10 years ago was they couldn't. So I don't think you can really blame Trump for that. You can blame Trump for posturing like a fool and making us look ridiculous in the
Yeah,
middle of it.
he
But,
always does. He's so
he
good at.
always does that.
next question is what is the impact of all of this on Israel's success on, like, with this attack, but also over the last couple of years in degrading Iran's capabilities on the Iranian regime stability?
I think literally nobody knows the answer to that question. The Iranian regime should have collapsed 2 decades ago and didn't. It has a great deal more staying power than anybody has really given it credit for, except itself. It's deeply unpopular. Um, it's it does not inspire loyalty, but it does. It is sufficiently repressive to not collapse easily, and I don't think the whether external pressures weaken it or strengthen it, I honestly don't know. And the Iran analysts whom I most trust don't purport to know either. There's definitely a group of people in Iran who, in the face of external attacks, understandably rally behind their leadership. There's also at all of these protests, in Iran, you do get some, I don't know, enthusiasm for, you know, there's no enthusiasm for the nuclear program, let's put it that way. And so I don't know. And, Israel, to its, I think, in a reflection of its sophistication, does not purport to, it never talks in the language of regime change, right? There's none of the US sort of delusions about we're going to remake or we're going to affect the governance of. And you see that also in Syria, right, where they just destroy equipment and they there's not enough Israelis to have dreams about remaking the Middle East. They
Well,
only protect their equities.
yeah, recent history has really dampened the regime change aspirations across the board. I feel like it's
Yes,
careful
but
what
they
you wish.
never had them.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for. Um, yeah, and the protests that were going on in Iran, when was that? That was a couple years
It's been
ago.
episodic over many years, but the most recent ones were the
It was,
feminist
yeah, it
protests.
was a lot of women, right?
Um,
Have those sort of been quelled?
yeah, if you beat enough people and hang a few,
Put a damper on things.
you can put a damper on that sort of thing. But I think it's fair to anticipate that, you know, the the regime is very deeply unpopular, and the the population is young, it's pretty educated, it's modern, and there's not a lot of enthusiasm for a revolutionary style regime that impoverishes its people and projects violence against civilians in all of the neighboring countries, right? That's not, if you had a truly democratic election in Iran, one thing you would have is Israeli-Iranian rapprochement very quickly. And I think there's a there's a perception, particularly among lefty American and European college student types who are angry, rightly so, at Israel's uh, uh, treatment of Palestinians, that there's some sort of deep organic connection between that and this, right? And that is just almost complete bullshit. Um, and, the Iranian situation is its own theater. And The Lebanese situation is its own theater, right? These are connected conflicts only in the very limited sense that all of them trade on the Palestinian narrative, but they're not, you could, if you magicked a solution to Gaza and the West Bank, you'd still have this problem with Iran and they would figure out some other pretext for it.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything really to add on this topic.
All right, let's talk about Ghana because
Oh, there's nothing to add on that topic either, but
I had a Ghanaian experience
yeah.
yesterday that blew me away, which is why I'm in New York.
Yeah.
So I take the train up to the Amtrak up to New York to lecture at uh, the Columbia University Law School's National Security Seminar, which is a week-long national security seminar that my friend Matt Waxman and my friend Bobby Chesney teach. And they asked me to come be the closing speaker for it. So I show up. They had told me that a bunch of the students were from Ghana, but I hadn't really processed this. Um, and so the first thing we do is we go out to lunch with uh, two of the students in the seminar, one of whom is the she's the head of the, like, basically the congressional, she's a member of parliament who heads the Intelligence Oversight Committee. Um, and she is like one of the most impressive people I've met in, like, I don't know, 5 years. And she's also a medical doctor on the side. So imagine if the, head of the, uh, head of the Senate Intelligence Committee was like a doctor on the side. Um, and the other was a professor of national security law at the University of Ghana. And so we have this, like, wonderful conversation with the two of them over lunch, and then we go back. And first of all, the the students are basically all Ghanaian. There was one Australian and a German and a, scattered other people, but it's basically 50 Ghanaian uh, national security people. And it was one of the most impressive groups I have spoken to. And like, like, just quality. The questions was exceptionally high. The sophistication about American national security legal structures and the degree to which you can map them on to other countries, the sense of the sophistication of um, the uh, about questions like what constitutes a national security threat in an environment in which Donald Trump is the president. It was just a
Fair
remarkable.
question. I'm
It,
not.
I don't know the answer to it. And so I came away saying I want to go to Ghana.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna go. I'm gonna go. I have a friend moving there, so I'm gonna go.
so
Let's go together.
yeah, let's go to Ghana. So here's my question. What do we know about the current Ghanaian constitutional system? My impression is that Ghana has been like something of a Costa Rica-like story in its region, but I don't know very much about it, and I thought, well, I should ask Holly.
Okay, so caveat is I am not a West Africa expert and don't know that much. However, what I can tell you about Ghana, first of all, there is, and I just want to preface this by saying I am not condoning or complimenting colonialism in any way. However, the former British colonies, there is a strong, I mean, the former British colonies, and to include ourselves, um, are generally more impressive than other. Like, there's something about the British actually built more in the way of institutions and educational systems. The acquisition of English language has served these countries very well, have high English, because English has become the international language and it links them and gives them way more opportunities out in the world. There is an appreciation, even in dictatorial former British colonies, there's a sort of a underlying culture of lawyers and people interested in the law, and
I
that
mean, just to have, I don't
yeah,
like, just to have a professor of national security law, um, I don't, I don't know very many countries that even have like a law school with a professor of national security law that aren't, war fighting countries, or in the immediate post 9/11 period, like lots of, but I like this woman, this is what she teaches.
yeah.
And that's really interesting.
Yeah, Andrew has asked, is casting aspersions based on South Africa and Zimbabwe? No, South Africa and Zimbabwe are exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, first of all, South Africa had a British colonial, and that was the center. It still is the center, the intellectual center of the country in South Africa, in Western Cape. And South Africa has a very strong legal. Their judiciary is like killer, and they have a very strong legal community. And even in Zimbabwe, as dictatorial, it's eroded since 2000 due to just the brain drain and the economics of it. But Zimbabwe has been known as one of the the best educated populations in Africa, and again, strong contingent of civil rights people and legal experts and civil society that has been assaulted and eroded in the last 25 years. But the basis there is quite good. So even Zimbabwe, as dictatorial as it is, so there, it's not across the board. There's obviously exceptions, Sierra Leone, things like that. But as a rule, so Ghana is part of that tradition. I would say Kenya, Nigeria, all of these countries have a sort of basis of really impressive, well-educated folks, particularly in the legal realm. Ghana in the 1990s, so the Jerry Rawlings took over in, I think, 89 in a coup, but then he, like, I guess, had regrets about that and decided he would try to liberalize Ghana. And so in the 1990s, they sort of had a whole liberalization. And I think I'm not sure about this, again, not an expert, but I think they adopted a new, maybe, or did a bunch of constitutional reform. And so since 2000, Ghana has emerged as one of the stronger democracies in Africa. And they've had multiple peaceful changes of power, including, I think just last year, didn't they? I think their last election was last year. However, so one of the things you do see in Ghana that you also see in, quickly, Holly, in other African emerging, democracies, is there's sort of an elite internecine. They tend to trade power back and forth. So, like, the current president has been the president before. Where have we heard that? And then, like, ran and lost another 2 times. And so it's like this constant, and you see this in Kenya too. It's the same sort of crowd. Yes, they might be in different parties, but their kind of interests are all the same. That tends to breed. So they do have a bit of a corruption problem, and their institutions could be stronger. But again, they're doing pretty well, and they are in this tradition of the former British colonies, that I think does make a difference. So
Interesting. Well,
on Ghana.
I was super impressed and now am very curious about going to Ghana. So that is on my travel agenda. Look, folks,
You got to come to Kenya first, though. We can go to Ghana, we can stop in Ghana, and then we got to go to Kenya.
all right,
They have an idea for you. So,
we're going to be back, but it is not going to be on Monday. It is not going to be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or next Friday. I am taking a vacation. I am going to one of the few states I've never been to, and I'm going to bask in the sun. I'm going to hike. I'm going to not do work. And you guys, some of you are going to show up on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and you're going to say, where is Ben? Where is Holly? Where is the cactus? And then you're going to remember that it's vacation week. Folks, I can't do anything about that for you. It's going to happen, and there's going to be some messages for me. I'm sorry in advance. Um, y'all have a great week. And there will be one dog shirt over the weekend because, the Sunday dog shirt. But then we're going dark for a week. EJ Wittes is taking a vacation. I'm taking a
Coming?
vacation.
Going with you? EJ going?
Nope, nope.
Oh.
Um, and you guys enjoy yourselves. Uh, uh, Protest activity, very good. And we're gonna be back, and hang on there without me. It'll be okay.